When the fire's nearly dead and the wind's screaming down through the black pines, the old frontiersman didn't panic. He leaned on 15 cabin heating secrets we've forgotten, and the first 5 are what turned 4 bare log walls into a trap that held every bit of heat inside. Stick with me and subscribe for the next forgotten story from the cold frontier, the old survival wisdom that time nearly erased. Picture yourself at the door of a single-room log cabin, deep in the black of night, the wind bending the pines flat and the fire inside guttering down to almost nothing, colds pressing on the walls. And the old man in that cabin knows something you and I forgot a long time ago. The first secret is the one nobody wants to hear. He never let the cabin be big. One tight, low room. That was the whole house. A small room heats fast and holds what it's got. A grand cabin with all that empty air is a cold cabin every single night. Space you can't heat is just space that's trying to freeze you. Second, he built low. The roof came down close over your head. A sod roof packed thick or heavy timber pressed down tight. Heat rises. You know that. So a low ceiling traps that warmth right where you're sitting instead of letting it climb up and away into some tall, empty peak. Look up at that low roof for a second. If the ceilings in your house are high and grand, you're heating the sky, and the old-timers would have shaken their heads. Third, where he put the fire. Not shoved back against the outer wall, bleeding good heat straight out into the night. He set the hearth toward the middle of the room. Out there, the warmth throws in every direction, all the way to the walls, instead of dumping half of it into the cold outside. Fourth, look behind the fire. Stacked up there, a wall of flat river stones. That stone back soaked up the heat while the flames burned, then kept throwing it gentle into the room long after the fire dropped low. A reflector and a battery both. Quiet, no moving parts, just cold stone doing warm work. Fifth, and this one's slow and patient, the chinking. Every gap between the logs, every crack where the wind could finger its way in, packed full of moss and daubed over with clay. Moss and clay worked in by hand until the wall went solid. That's the difference between a cabin and a sieve. And here's how he found every last leak. He took a lit candle and crawled the whole wall with it, low and slow, watching the little flame. Where it stood straight and still, the wall was tight. But every place a hidden draft was sneaking in. That flame leaned, bent sideways, pointing right at the gap. Then he'd stuff it, seal it, and move on. That candle test is the moment most folks skip. Run your eye along your own walls tonight, every window, every door, and think of that little leaning flame, because that's exactly where your heat is walking out the door. So now the walls are packed. The candle flame stands dead straight. The room's holding its warmth, snug as it's going to get. 4 log walls turned into a trap the cold can't crack. But look at that hearth. The fire that's keeping you alive tonight will be nothing but a red mound of coals by midnight. And what the old man did in that black middle of the night, that's where the real cold wisdom lived. So he knelt down at the hearth and he banked the fire. You rake the coals into a tight little mound right in the middle, then you bury them under a blanket of ash. That ash is the whole trick. It smothers the flame down to a slow red breathing, so the coals don't roar themselves out by midnight. They smolder low and patient, clear on till dawn. Come morning, 1 poke and 1 dry stick, and the whole thing wakes right back up. Simple, and it saved a man from waking to a dead cold house. Next, the door. He hung a heavy bearskin over it, or a thick wool blanket if he had no bear. The door's the weakest wall in any cabin. The cold leans on it all night long, pushing a knife-thin draft right along the floor toward your feet. So he made a second wall, a curtain of hide straight over the threshold, and that killing draft died there. The windows got the same treatment, thick hides or damp wool tacked tight over the shutters. Cold pours off glass in gaps like water off a roof, and most folks never even feel it coming. He did. He shut it out. Then he looked down. A bare plank floor sits over frozen ground, and that ground pulls the warmth straight up through the soles of your feet. You don't feel it leaving, but it leaves. So he laid it thick. Spruce boughs first, then woven rag rugs piled on top. A soft, dry island over that cold, hard board, and your feet stayed warm. Then he went back out into it, the wind screaming down through the black pines, and he banked snow against his own cabin, waist high, packed hard against the outside logs. Now, think on that. The very thing trying to kill you out there becomes your best blanket. Snow, packed against the wall, keeping you warm. A wall of packed snow holds the heat in like a wool coat wrapped around the whole house. Sounds backwards. It isn't. Back inside, he set a pot of water on the stove. If you've ever woken in a cold room with a throat like sandpaper, this next one's for you. One pot of water changed everything. That water does two jobs at once. It puts moisture back in the air so the heat don't dry you to a husk while you sleep. And it's thermal mass. It soaks up warmth and gives it back slow, long after the fire's low, a quiet thing. Most folks never think of water as heat. He did. Last thing before he lay down, the bed. He never let it sit low on that cold floor, and he never let it touch the outer logs. He raised it up on a frame, and he set it in close to that warm stone wall where the fire's heat still lived in the rock. That was the quiet know-how of people who lived close to the land. You don't fight the cold everywhere at once, you just put your body where the warmth already is. And now, listen, the air's warm, the drafts are dead. That little cabin's holding through the worst of the night. But that bed is still cold as a grave, and the last three secrets, they're all for the body itself, ending on the 15th, the one most folks never think of, the trick that carried the whole cabin clear till morning. So how did he beat the cold that bit clean through the blankets? That bed, cold as a grave, climbing into stiff, icy blankets after a whole day out in the frost, is its own kind of misery, and the old man had three last tricks aimed straight at it. First, before he ever lay down, he slid a warming pan of coals between the blankets. A flat, hot stone from the edge of the hearth did the same job. He'd run it back and forth under the wool, up and down, driving the chill clean out of the bedding while he banked the last of the fire. By the time he pulled the covers back, the sheets weren't a shock anymore. They were warm. Just that one move, that little pan of coals dragged through the blankets, and the worst part of a winter night was already beat. But he wasn't done. That same heated stone had one more job. He'd wrap it in a rag, in a scrap of old wool, wrapped in cloth so it wouldn't scorch the blankets, and set it down at the very bottom of the bed, right where his feet would go. Cold always bites the feet first. You know that if you've ever tried to sleep with frozen toes, so that's exactly where he put the warm stone. And a good flat stone, baked through, doesn't cool fast. It sits down there by your soles and breathes out a gentle heat for hours, long after you've drifted off. Warm bed, warm feet, sealed walls, dead drafts, snow banked high against the logs outside. The little cabin's got everything it needs now. Everything but the one trick that carries it all the way to morning. And here it is. This is the one I told you about at the start, and the trick most folks never think of. So stay right here for it. The big hearthstone. That broad, flat stone the fire sat on all evening. While the flames were roaring, they weren't just warming the room. They were baking that stone straight through, deep into the rock, hour after hour. Stone's slow. It takes a long time to heat, but that cuts both ways, and that's the whole secret. Because a stone that's slow to warm is slow to let go. So the flames die down. The coals get raked into their tight mound and buried under ash. The room goes quiet and dim. And that hearthstone just keeps breathing warmth into the dark, long after the last flame is gone. Hour after hour, it gives back everything the fire poured into it. A slow stone furnace sitting there in the middle of the cabin, carrying the whole place clear till dawn. That's why the old-timers never worried about the fire going out at midnight. They didn't need it to burn all night. They needed the stone to remember the heat. And it did. So think about the whole night now, start to finish. 15 tricks. He sealed the walls with moss and clay and read the drafts by candle flame. He held the heat through the black middle of the night with banked coals and a bearskin over the door. He warmed the body, the bed, the feet, and through all of it, at the center, that broad hearthstone glowing on, quiet and patient, doing the last of the work while he slept. Morning comes. Faint gray light through the shutters, an old man asleep and warm under his blankets, the stone still faintly breathing beside the banked coals. No furnace, no wires, just log walls, ash, snow, and stone. That's the quiet know-how of people who lived close to the land, and there's more where it came from. A whole frontier of it, waiting. So stick around, and I'll tell you the next forgotten story from the cold frontier.